It all started when Rachel Fischer moved in across the street, 3 houses down, and from the moment she arrived, it was clear we were in for some trouble. Within a week, she'd already reported 3 neighbors for what seemed like ridiculous HOA violations. One for leaving their trash can visible from the street, another for having a basketball hoop that had been there for over a decade, and the third for some wind chimes that were too loud. You know, just the typical Karen behavior, right? I decided to keep my head down, do my thing, and stay off her radar. I take pride in my home, but I'm not one to stir the pot. But then, one random Tuesday morning in April, everything changed. I was in the middle of a Zoom call with a client when I heard this strange buzzing noise coming from my backyard. At first, I thought it was just the wind or something, but nope. This sound didn't stop. It only got louder. I excused myself from the call, figuring it was probably something small like a lawnmower or a tree branch moving in the wind. But when I stepped outside and looked into my backyard, my heart nearly stopped. There she was, Rachel, standing in my yard with a chainsaw. She was right next to my beautiful century-old oak tree, hacking away at the trunk like she had the right to be there. I froze for a second. Was I dreaming? Then I yelled, trying to keep my cool, "What exactly do you think you're doing, Rachel?" Without missing a beat, she just smiled at me like it was no big deal. "Oh, hey James, just taking care of this tree situation," she said, like it was just some kind of routine task. This wasn't just any tree, by the way. It was my tree. It had been there long before either of us moved in, and there was no way I was going to let her destroy it. I walked closer, a sinking feeling in my stomach. "There's no tree situation," I said, my voice tight. "This is my tree, on my property, and you're trespassing." She didn't even flinch. "Well, according to HOA rules," she said, pulling out some nonsense about how trees over 35 feet tall were a hazard during storms and, get this, mine was 40 feet. So apparently, she had decided it needed to go. I was done. "Rachel, first of all, that rule doesn't even exist. Second, you have no business being here cutting down my tree." I was trying to keep my voice steady, but I was fuming. She didn't back down, though. She even had the nerve to tell me she was now the new HOA president. Can you believe that? The HOA president. And she was still out here with a chainsaw in my yard. That's when I knew I had to stand up, or she'd just keep pushing. So I told her, no, she needed to leave, or I was calling the cops. But she wasn't done yet. "I'll be back, James," she said, with that same creepy smile. "You'll get a violation notice for sure." And with that, she walked off like she hadn't just tried to destroy something I loved. I stood there, feeling my heart race. What the hell had just happened? After Rachel left, I was pissed, to put it simply. I stood there in the backyard, just staring at the tree she'd been hacking at like it was some unwanted weed. The nerve of her, coming into my yard with a chainsaw, treating my property like it was hers to destroy. I mean, this wasn't some random petty fight. This was criminal. She just trespassed and damaged my tree, and she didn't even seem to care. I went back inside, grabbed my phone, and called the one person I could think of who might help. Thomas, a lawyer friend of mine who specialized in property disputes. He was a no-nonsense guy, and I needed that right now. I quickly explained the whole situation to him, how Rachel had come into my yard without permission and tried to cut down my oak tree, which had been standing there for over 100 years. He listened patiently and then advised me to do 2 things. Document everything and get a police report filed ASAP. He also suggested I install security cameras to cover my property in case this happened again. I took his advice seriously and didn't waste any time. I called the police, and within 30 minutes, Officer Green and Officer Carter showed up. They listened to my story, inspected the damage to the tree, and even took some photos. It was clear that they took it seriously too. Officer Green looked at me and said, "This is definitely trespassing, James. And based on the damage to the tree, this could be a felony charge. Trees like that, mature oaks, can be worth tens of thousands of dollars. We'll take your statement and look into it. We'll also speak with Rachel to hear her side." I felt a small sense of relief hearing that. At least someone understood that this wasn't just some neighborhood squabble. It was a serious violation. But as the officers left, I had this sinking feeling that this was far from over. I just knew that Rachel wouldn't back off that easily. Sure enough, the very next day, I received a formal violation notice from the HOA. It was signed by Rachel herself, the new HOA president, apparently. According to the letter, I was being fined $500 for violating the HOA's non-existent tree removal bylaw, and the fine would go up by $100 every day until I resolved the issue. I stared at the letter, trying to process what had just happened. She was doing this to me? Using her fake position to try and bully me into submission? My first reaction was to laugh. It was so ridiculous. But then the anger hit. How could she get away with this? I didn't waste time with my next move. I immediately shot an email to the other members of the HOA board, attaching the violation notice and explaining everything that had happened. I also asked for the minutes from the last board meeting, the one where Rachel supposedly got elected as president. I wasn't prepared for the flood of responses that came in. Within a few hours, I had emails from several board members expressing shock and confusion. Apparently, Rachel hadn't been elected as president at all. There had been no vote, and the last board meeting had been held the week before. They had no idea why she was claiming to be the HOA president. In fact, she hadn't even been nominated for that position. One of the actual board members, Kevin, called me directly. "James, I don't know what Rachel's playing at, but she's absolutely not the HOA president. We've been dealing with this for years now, and Rachel was only added to the landscaping committee. That's it. I'll look into this and get back to you." I felt a huge sense of relief. Finally, it was starting to make sense. Rachel had managed to manipulate her way into a small position on the landscaping committee, and somehow in her mind, that gave her the authority to destroy property? This whole thing was crazy, and I knew I needed to protect myself and my tree, my property, before it got worse. So I kept pushing. I asked Kevin to contact the rest of the HOA board members, and I made sure to follow up regularly. Meanwhile, I wasn't taking any chances. I went ahead and ordered a set of security cameras for my house. I also reached out to an arborist doctor, Patel, who came by later that afternoon to assess the damage to my tree. When he saw the cut on the trunk, he let out a deep sigh. "You're lucky she didn't get very far," he said, examining the wound. "This tree is a living piece of history. If she'd gone a little deeper, you would have had major problems. Trees like this are fragile. One wrong cut and they can be weakened, especially in a storm." I asked him about the tree's value, and what he said left me speechless. "This tree is easily worth around $40,000 in a market like this. If you can prove that she damaged it, it could lead to major legal consequences," Dr. Patel explained. I could hardly believe it. That was when the weight of it all really hit me. Not only had she violated my property, but the tree itself was worth more than I had ever imagined. This wasn't just a matter of some backyard argument anymore. It was about serious damage to something valuable, something irreplaceable. I had no idea what Rachel was going to do next, but I was ready for it. The next few days were strangely quiet. Too quiet. After everything that had happened, I half expected Rachel to come back, maybe with some ridiculous excuse or new tactic, but nothing. Her house was the same, lights flickering on and off, her car coming and going, but she didn't bother me. It made me uneasy, like the calm before a storm. But then came the letter. It was a formal violation notice from the HOA, just like the first one, but this time it came with a twist. The letter claimed I had violated an HOA bylaw I knew didn't exist and imposed a $500 fine, with $100 added daily until the issue was resolved. But what got under my skin the most wasn't the fine. It was the fact that the letter was signed by Rachel. The same Rachel who'd been caught trespassing in my yard, trying to destroy my tree. Now she was using her so-called new position as HOA president to go after me. I felt the anger rise again. This was beyond ridiculous. I had to fight back, and I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I immediately called Kevin again, the real HOA president. He was as baffled as I was when he saw the letter. "James, we've got a serious problem. Not only did Rachel not get elected as president, but she's forged a violation notice in her name. This isn't just petty anymore. This is fraud." I knew I couldn't let this slide, but I also needed more than just words. I needed proof, evidence to expose Rachel's manipulation and hopefully, put an end to it once and for all. That's when things started to shift. I went back to the security footage. I hadn't looked at it much since I installed the cameras, but now I realized it was crucial. The footage from the morning Rachel tried to cut my tree down was there, and it was crystal clear. Not only did it show her trespassing, but you could hear her clearly talking to herself about the tree issue. And even worse, there was a moment when she actually looked around like she was worried someone would see her. She thought she was above the law, untouchable. I saved the footage and emailed it to Kevin, along with the photos the police had taken and the arborist's assessment of the damage. It was starting to feel like the pieces were finally coming together. Kevin promised me that he would call an emergency HOA board meeting to discuss Rachel's actions. I was still shaking from the sheer audacity of it all. How had she gone this far? But there was no time for dwelling. I had to focus on stopping her. The next day, the call came. Kevin and a few other board members had reviewed the footage and evidence, and they were furious. "We're removing her from the board," Kevin told me, his voice firm. "She's out of line, and this whole presidency thing, it's over." I had to admit, I was relieved. Finally, the truth was out. Rachel had been lying to everyone, using her so-called position to make my life a living hell. But as much as I felt like I'd won a small victory, I knew that Rachel wouldn't just roll over. Not after everything she'd done. That same afternoon, things took another unexpected turn. Officer Green called me. "James, we've spoken to Rachel. She's completely uncooperative. She's sticking to her story, saying she had every right to cut your tree down. But there's more. We've reviewed the video footage, and based on the damage to the tree, we're treating it as a felony. Your tree is worth tens of thousands of dollars. We're moving forward with charges." My heart pounded in my chest. I hadn't expected this. Charges? This was getting real. I had to admit I felt a mix of relief and dread. I was finally being taken seriously, but the whole situation was spiraling out of control. But there was no turning back now. This wasn't just a battle with Rachel anymore. It was a fight to protect what was mine. My property, my history, my tree. I spent the next few days focusing on one thing: protecting myself. The police had warned me Rachel might escalate, but I wasn't going to let her. I double-checked the cameras, re-examined the footage, and made sure my documentation was airtight. I also made sure to keep a record of everything, just in case Rachel tried to pull something else. I wasn't going to be caught off guard again. And then, just when I thought the worst was behind me, I got a call from Thomas. "They're coming after you," he said, sounding urgent. "Rachel's already hired a lawyer. She's trying to play the victim, saying you're the one who caused all this trouble. But don't worry, James. You've got the upper hand here. Just stay calm, keep everything documented, and we'll handle it." I felt a wave of frustration. Was she seriously trying to flip this around? After everything she'd done, now she was playing the victim? But Thomas was right. I had the upper hand. Between the police report, the video footage, the arborist's valuation of the tree, and the emails from the HOA board members confirming Rachel's fraudulent behavior, I was in a strong position. Rachel had thought she could bulldoze her way through this neighborhood, but I wasn't going to let her. Not now, not ever. Things were about to get a whole lot more intense, but for the first time in this entire mess, I felt like I was finally in control. The days following the news that charges might be filed against Rachel felt like an emotional roller coaster. I was constantly on edge, checking my phone, replaying the security footage, and anticipating her next move. The more I thought about it, the more I realized Rachel wasn't just some overly ambitious neighbor. She was dangerous. She had crossed every line, from forging HOA documents to trespassing on my property. And now, knowing she had the audacity to hire a lawyer and turn the whole thing around, I wasn't sure what lengths she might go to next. I had a bad feeling in my gut that this wasn't over. And sure enough, one afternoon as I was working from home, I heard a strange sound in the backyard. Again. My heart dropped into my stomach. My first thought was that Rachel had come back to finish what she started. This time, though, I wasn't going to stand by and let her get away with it. I grabbed my phone and started recording, just in case. I cautiously made my way to the back of the house, staying as quiet as possible, the adrenaline already coursing through my veins. I peered around the corner of the house, and there she was. Rachel, standing in my yard, with a chainsaw. Again, I couldn't believe it. After everything, after all of it, she was still here, still trying to cut down my tree. I froze for a moment, not out of fear, but out of sheer disbelief. Was she seriously going to do this again? Was I supposed to just stand by and watch her ruin what was mine? I stepped forward, heart pounding in my chest. This was the moment. I wasn't about to let her get away with it again. "Rachel!" I yelled, my voice loud enough to startle her. She spun around, eyes wide in surprise. The chainsaw, still in her hands, was buzzing like some sort of sick joke. "James," she said, her voice dripping with feigned innocence. I, I thought I'd come and take care of the tree for you, since you don't seem to know how to handle things around here." "You are crazy," I snapped, my anger bubbling to the surface. "What part of 'leave my property alone' do you not understand?" Her expression faltered, but only for a second. Then it was back to that smug, entitled look I had come to despise. "I'm the new HOA president. I'm doing what's necessary for the community, James. This tree has to go. It's a safety hazard." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "That's bullshit, Rachel. This tree's been here for over 100 years and it's not going anywhere. And you're not cutting it down either." Something snapped in her eyes. The momentary confusion turned to cold resolve. "You're going to regret this, James. You'll see. I'm making sure the HOA gets involved. You'll be sorry for challenging me." I wasn't backing down now. "Go ahead. Call the HOA. Call the cops. Call whoever you want. You've already crossed a line, Rachel. And you're about to cross another one. You're trespassing. Again. And if you don't leave my property right now, I'm calling the police." Rachel seemed to hesitate for a split second, just long enough for me to see the uncertainty in her eyes. But then her face hardened, and she made the worst mistake of all. She lunged at me with the chainsaw. My heart skipped a beat. This was it. This was the escalation I'd been afraid of. But I was ready. I stepped back quickly, avoiding her swing, and pulled out my phone. "I'm calling the police. This is it, Rachel. You've gone too far." She froze, and for a second I thought maybe she'd back down. But then, she did something that took me completely by surprise. She dropped the chainsaw on the ground with a heavy thud and walked toward me with a cold, calculated smile. "You won't get away with this," she spat, her eyes filled with hatred. "I'll make sure you regret this. I'll make sure the HOA gets involved and I'll ruin you." I didn't flinch. "You've already tried to ruin me, Rachel. It's not going to work. I'm done being bullied." With that, I hit the call button on my phone and dialed 911. As I stood there, waiting for the operator to answer, I felt a strange sense of calm. This was it. I was finally standing up for myself in the most definitive way possible. When the operator picked up, I didn't waste any time. "Yes, I need to report trespassing and attempted destruction of property," I said, my voice steady. "A woman named Rachel Fischer is on my property again with a chainsaw, trying to cut down my tree. This is the second time she's done this, and I need help. She's threatening me, and I'm afraid it's going to escalate." I heard the operator's voice on the other end, asking for my address, and I quickly provided the information. I made sure to clarify that I had video footage of the entire incident, that Rachel had already been warned by the police, and that this was no longer just a simple dispute. It was now a serious criminal matter. By the time the police arrived, Rachel had already stormed off, but the damage was done. I had her on video once again trespassing, trying to destroy my tree, and threatening me. I showed the officers the footage from my security cameras, and their reaction was immediate. "We're going to need to take this to the next level," Officer Green said. "She's been warned multiple times, and this is beyond just a nuisance now. It's criminal. You're within your rights to press charges." My blood ran cold as I realized what this meant. Rachel had crossed the line. She wasn't just a problem neighbor anymore. She was a criminal, and now it was time for the consequences to catch up with her. I knew things would get messy from here, but for the first time in months, I felt like I was finally in control. Rachel had underestimated me, and now it was time to make her pay for what she'd done. This wasn't just about a tree anymore. It was about standing up for what was mine, and making sure she couldn't bully me, or anyone else, ever again. As I watched the officers take down her information and prepare to file charges, I felt something shift inside me. This was the turning point. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. And Rachel? She had no idea what was coming next. The weeks that followed were a blur. Rachel was arrested that night, caught red-handed on my security cameras, trespassing and attempting to damage my property again. The district attorney moved quickly with the charges, felony destruction of property and trespassing, and I was notified that I'd likely be called to testify at trial. Honestly, I couldn't believe how quickly everything was unfolding. I had been living in a neighborhood where this kind of petty drama was just a nuisance, and suddenly, it had turned into something that actually held people accountable for their actions. Rachel, of course, didn't go down without a fight. She tried to spin the whole thing into some kind of personal vendetta, claiming that I was harassing her, that she was simply trying to fix the neighborhood. But nobody was buying it. The HOA board had already removed her from the landscaping committee, and I received apologies from several of my neighbors who hadn't realized just how far Rachel had gone in her campaign of terror. Some even came by with flowers or baked goods, trying to make up for how little they had intervened earlier. It felt nice, honestly, to see people come together in a way I hadn't expected. The community that I had felt distant from had rallied behind me, and it made me feel less isolated, less like the crazy neighbor Rachel had painted me to be. Then came the final blow. A few weeks after her arrest, I got a letter from the court saying Rachel had accepted a plea deal. She was going to pay restitution for the damage to my tree, an amount that covered not only the tree's value but also the costs of removal, as well as any legal fees. She was also ordered to complete community service, attend mandatory mental health counseling, and, most significantly, stay away from me and my property. As if that wasn't enough, I got a call from the HOA's actual president, Kevin. He had a small ceremony planned, a sort of reparations event for the neighborhood. He wanted me to speak, just to give some closure to the whole ordeal. I agreed, and we gathered in front of my house, where the remnants of my oak tree had been carefully removed. In its place stood a beautiful young white oak sapling, a gift from a nursery that specialized in trees with historical significance. The new tree wasn't as grand as the old one, but it would grow, just like the community had grown stronger in the wake of this whole mess. It felt symbolic. The community was thriving, the HOA was stronger and more transparent, and I had finally taken control of my own life, free from the shadow Rachel had cast over it for so long. As I looked around at my neighbors, I realized something. Sometimes we need to stand up for what's ours, even when it feels uncomfortable, even when the odds seem stacked against us. And I'm not just talking about property. I'm talking about boundaries, respect, and standing your ground. Rachel had tried to tear down something I loved, but in the process, she'd only made us all realize how important it was to protect our homes and our communities. And here's the kicker. If you don't stand up, no one else will. Sometimes doing the right thing isn't easy, but it's always worth it. With that, I finished my little speech, and we all raised our glasses to the new tree, to the new beginning for the neighborhood. If you've enjoyed this story, make sure to hit like and subscribe for more wild HOA stories. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Stay strong, stand up for what's right, and remember, you are the one who can make the difference in your community. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.